Up YouTube? This is the 82 and 0 podcast. Now, continuing on with our 75 greatest players of all time, we're going to Shaquille O'Neal. And Shaquille O'Neal was born March 6, 1972, in Newark, New Jersey, to Lucille and Joe Tony. Now, his biological father, Tony, had struggled with drug addiction and drug possession. And O'Neal didn't actually grow up with his biological father in his life. And instead, his mother married a Jamaican man named Philip A. Harrison, who was an army sergeant. And if you've ever watched interviews with Shaquille O'Neal, you always hear him talk about his stepfather. He doesn't call him stepfather, but he calls him the sergeant or his dad. And you know he loves his dad. He has so many stories about his dad. But anyways, his father, I'm going to refer to Philip Harrison, the stepfather, as his father. His father would go over to Germany. That's where he'd be stationed. And Shaq was on a military base going to school. And he'd play basketball on the military base. And the O'Neal family went from Germany before settling to San Antonio, Texas. This is where he would go to high school at. And at the age of 16, he was 6'10", and he began playing basketball at Robert G. Cole High School, which he led his team to a 68-1 record over the 2 years that he played there. And they won a state championship there. He also got 791 rebounds during the 1989 season, and that remains a state record for every player that ever played high school basketball in Texas. And he grew up watching Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and he wanted to do the hook shots like him. And that's why he would wear 33 in high school, was because of Kareem. But he eventually went to number 32 in college, which he would go to Louisiana State University, where he played for the Tigers, Coach Dale Brown, which Dale had actually met him years earlier in Europe when O'Neal's stepfather was stationed over there on a base, which is why he chose to play there. And for those of you who don't know, O'Neal was very, very strong in those earlier LSU days. He would break backboards, and go look up footage of him dunking. He'd break backboards and shatter it. And he left the LSU early to pursue an NBA career because he wanted to get paid. Now, an interesting fact about Shaq is he wanted to be a football player originally, but seeing how much basketball players got paid, and given that his height, he was 7'1", he decided to declare for the draft. Now, the funny thing is if you go on YouTube and you watch the 1992 draft, I thought this was interesting. It came down really close in the drawing because they had a draft drawing, so they put the team into a drawing, and their name and the team name would be drawn out. And Charlotte came really close to drafting Shaquille O'Neal. They would get Alonzo Mourning, who was from Georgetown University. But the Orlando Magic were who selected Shaquille O'Neal. And there was a lot of hype about Shaquille O'Neal coming into the NBA. If you watch some of these old commercials on YouTube, you saw him with Bill Walton, Wilt Chamberlain, Bill Russell, and he would have his own sneakers in the 90s. He would have a rap album in the 90s. Yeah, he even rapped. A lot of the younger people don't know that. And he would star in movies. He played Steel, which is, for anybody who doesn't know, a DC Comics character. And he'd be in the movie Kazam. So Shaq was big in the 90s. He was a cultural icon in the 90s. Everybody knew who Shaq is. But starting out his career, He did win Rookie of the Year in the 92-93 campaign. He put up 23.4 points per game, 13.9 rebounds, and 3.5 blocks per game. Now, they didn't go to the playoffs his first year. This is before they would get Penny Anderson, but going into the 93-94 season, this is when you start to see glimpses of what this Magic team could be, because now they had Anthony Hardaway, also known as Penny Hardaway, and Shaq would put up 29 points per game, 13 rebounds, and 2.9 blocks. And they would go 50-32, losing in the first round to the Indiana Pacers in a sweep. And going into the 94-95 season, they would go 57-25. And keep in mind, this is the Magic team that signed Horace Grant, who was a Bulls player in those earlier Bulls playoff runs. And Shaq would go average 29 points per game, 11.4 rebounds per game, 2.4 blocks. Then Penny Hardaway would put up 20.9 points per game, 4.4 rebounds, 7.2 assists per game, and 1.7 steals per game on 50% from the floor and 34% from three. So this was looking like the team of the future. They also had great role players like Nick Anderson, Horace Grant, like I mentioned. And this was the year Jordan got back from playing baseball. And he came back with 17 games left in the regular season with the Chicago Bulls. And so in the second round, the Bulls were matched up with the Orlando Magic. And this is an interesting fact. The Orlando Magic are the only team in the 90s, other than the Detroit Pistons in 1990, to defeat Jordan and the Bulls. And a lot of this had to do with rebounding, because this was before they acquired Dennis Rodman. They got out-rebounded in that series. Because they lost Horace Grant, but all excuses aside, the Magic defeated them. And they defeated the Indiana Pacers in 7 games in the Eastern Conference Finals. And they went to their finals. This is the Orlando Magic's first finals appearance. Shaq was only 22. Penny was 23. And Hakeem Olajuwon, who played on the Houston Rockets, embarrassed Shaq. He outscored him every single game of that series. He out-rebounded him every game of that series except for Game 2. And Hakeem Olajuwon averaged 32 points per game in that series on 48% shooting. Shaquille O'Neal only averaged 28. I'm saying only very lightly, but he couldn't get it done. And that's the second time they got swept. Or I should say Shaq got swept. Now, the 95-96 season, they went 60-22. And they would make it to the Eastern Conference Finals, which they were matched up against the Chicago Bulls again. And the Bulls swept them 4-0. So this is now the third year in a row that Shaq got swept. And this, I consider this Shaq and Penny's best individual season years. And it's kind of sad to say this, but look at it like this, right? They had a very good team. Shaq only played 54 games that year, and they still won 60 games. That's showing you how deep this team was. They had Horace Grant, like I said, Nick Anderson, Dennis Scott, Anthony Hardaway. This team wasn't a joke. Nick Anderson. So, here's the thing. In that offseason was Shaq's first free agency, right? And Shaq could have re-signed with the Orlando Magic, and the Magic could have matched any contract he had. But the Magic, they didn't want to pay Shaq. I know that sounds stupid. They could have built their team around Shaq and Penny for the future, but they wanted to just pay Penny Hardaway. They didn't want to bring Shaq. I know that sounds so weird. And Shaq even, which I forgot to mention, played in the 96 Olympics. And an interesting fact is in the Orlando Centennial, which is like a article series, they published a poll on whether the Magic should fire Hill, which is one of the coaches, and 82% answered no. And O'Neal had a power struggle with Coach Hill. They didn't get along. He didn't respect Hill. He wanted him gone. And Shaq wanted $115 million. And they took a poll on that, and 91% of the people that answered in the poll said Shaq was not worth the $115 million. And this, I feel, influenced Shaq to leave. The Orlando media was just it didn't seem to be in Shaq's favor. The people of Orlando didn't seem to have Shaq's back on this. No pun intended. And another reason why O'Neal left is he didn't like that he didn't have any privacy in Orlando. Orlando isn't a super big city, and he just felt like he was a big fish in a small pond. He didn't feel like he was going to go anywhere, even though they had Hardaway. And so he decided he wanted to go to a bigger market, and he decided to go to the Lakers. And the Lakers signed him to $121 million. 7-year, $121 million. And if I'm not mistaken, someone can correct me if I'm wrong during this. I think this was the biggest NBA contract at that time. I could be wrong. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong. And he got all these endorsements when he was over in LA. He got Pepsi to work with him, Reebok. For those of you who don't remember, he had a Reebok Shaq line. The Shaqnosis is what it was called. And so he was gone. That was it for the Magic. And he goes to his first year there over in Los Angeles. And Jerry West, who was the executive, has built a team around him and Kobe Bryant. Now, unfortunately, the 97 season, they lose to the Jazz in 5. The 98 season, they would get swept, which this is now the 4th time Shaq has been swept. The 99 season, Shaq gets swept again by the San Antonio Spurs. Now, the 2000 season is when the Lakers got it together. They brought over Phil Jackson. The Lakers went 67-15 that year. They were the first defensive rated team and the 5th offensive rated team. This is when Kobe took a leap, but not only that, Shaq entered his absolute prime. He put up 29 points per game, 13 rebounds, 3.8 assists, 3.0 blocks, and he won his first MVP that year. And he put up 30.6 PER. And they would go on to win in 2001, which they had one of the most incredible playoff runs. They swept the Portland Trail Blazers, the Sacramento Kings, the San Antonio Spurs, and they beat the Sixers in 5 games in the finals. And every one of these teams that they beat were a 51-win team. They were a 50-win team. So going into the 2002 season, they win their 3rd championship. And I've mentioned in my Kobe video about the feud between Shaq and Kobe. I don't want to get into this in this video. If you want to check it out, eventually I'm going to do a Shaq and Kobe beef video to show you what went wrong. But 02-03, they lose in 6 games to the Spurs. But in 04, they built the super team. They brought over Gary Payton. They brought over Karl Malone. And even though Shaq and Kobe were feuding and Kobe had legal troubles, this was supposed to be their 4th championship together. They go to the finals, and they were upset by the Detroit Pistons. A lot of this was due to Kobe's poor performance. He shot them out of the series. Now, for the 04-05 season, this is, I should say at the start of the 04-05 season. This is where it all came to a head because the Shaq pretty much told the Lakers, "It's me or Kobe. You have to pick." And the Lakers, they obviously went with Kobe because Kobe was much younger. So they traded Shaq to the Heat for Caron Butler, Brian Grant, and Lamar Odom, and a first-round draft pick that became Jordan Farmer. And this worked out pretty good for Shaq because in the 04-05 season on the Miami Heat, they went 59-23, losing to the Detroit Pistons in 7 games in the Eastern Conference Finals. And I was on this Heat team. He was matched up with Dwayne Wade, who was drafted in the 03-04 season. That was his first year. Dwayne Wade would be his future sidekick now. Now, this time, though, it was undoubtedly that Shaq was going to take the second-hand role. So in that 04-05 season, Dwayne Wade would average 24 points per game, 5.2 rebounds per game, 6.8 assists per game, 1.6 steals per game, 1.1 blocks per game. So you can see he was a good all-around player, but Shaq was at putting up 22 points per game and 10 rebounds per game and 2 blocks per game. So, yeah, he was undeniably the second star at this time. Go to the 05-06 season. The Heat win the championship. This is Shaq's 4th ring. And they would defeat the Dallas Mavericks in 6 games. And this would be Dwayne Wade getting the Finals MVP, which I should mention, the 3 Lakers championships were Shaq's Finals MVP. So he was undoubtedly, at this time, starting to slow down. He was 33 years old. He put up just 20 points per game that year. But he got his ring. And they were hoping they could run it back. But in the 07 season, they lost in the first round. And a lot of this was due to injuries. Shaq had been hurt that year. He only played 40 games. And unfortunately, a lot of the team was hurt. And this started Shaq's definite regression. Like I said, he missed 35 games that year. He had left knee surgery. And you started to see he started having tensions even in Miami. And he had a really rough start to the 07-08 season. He put up career lows in rebounds and blocks. So, like I said, he was starting to fall off. I'm not saying that at this point he was just fighting to play in the NBA. He was just so far removed from what he had been. And O'Neal was starting to get real out of shape during this time. And he was missing games due to injuries. And the Heat had a 15-game losing streak that year. And O'Neal only played 33 games for the Miami Heat that year. And they traded him to the Phoenix Suns. And this would start his Phoenix Suns days. And here's what you got to understand. The Suns wanted to build a championship team around Shaq as a co-star because they felt they didn't have a good big down low to stop some of the other bigs because the Suns had been losing to guys like Spurs with Tim Duncan. And so the Suns, they got rid of a really good core piece they had in Sean Marion. They thought they were going to win the championship with Shaq matched up with Nash and Stoudemire. So 07-08, they would finish their record at 55-27. But they'd lose in the first round to the Spurs. And Shaq would play those 5 games, but he'd just put up 15 points and 9 rebounds. Now, the 08-09 season is crazy because although they went 46-36, which is a good record, it's not great, but they wouldn't even make the playoffs because the Western Conference was so deep that year. The 8th-seeded team that year was a 50-win team in the Dallas Mavericks. They had a 49-win Hornet team. But this is when Shaq wanted out. He wanted a ring of his. He wanted his fifth ring because Kobe won his fifth ring in 2009. So Shaq would go to Cleveland. He'd sign a contract with Cleveland, and in Cleveland, this is undoubtedly where you were started to see, okay, Shaq is not gonna. It's not only that he's regressing; it's that he might not even have a roster spot. Because in Cleveland, he wanted to get his fifth ring and potentially have a finals matchup with Kobe and the Lakers. Because, like I said, when he left the Lakers, he wanted to outdo Kobe. Kobe now has his fourth championship. Shaq has his fourth championship. So in 09-10 on Cleveland, he was playing with LeBron. And this is one of the best Cavs teams despite Shaq not doing too well. The Cavs that year went 61-21. But they lost in the conference semifinals to the Celtics, which he would end up coincidentally the next year, because he was obviously ring chasing. He signed with the Celtics in 2010-11. That would be his last year. He only played 37 games that year. And they would lose in the second round to the Miami Heat, which Shaq would only play 2 games, and he put up 1 point per game. So that was the end of Shaq's career. And it's pretty sad he didn't get a fifth ring chasing at the end, and he couldn't tie Kobe up, but is what it is. So he retires. He had a long career playing from 92-93 to 10-11. He's at the end of his career, he is a 15-time All-Star, 2-time scoring champ, 4-time NBA champ, 14-time All-NBA. He was the 93 Rookie of the Year, 3-time All-Defensive, and he was a 3-time All-Star Game MVP and a 3 times Finals MVP, and he was the year 2000 MVP. Now, a critique about Shaq. He wasn't the best defender for his position. And I know it's crazy because he'd average like 3 blocks, 2 blocks, but a lot of that is the era and guys playing down low. He was only a 3-time all-defensive player. And another critique about him is he never worked on his free throw shooting. And had he just been a decent free throw shooter, he could have been winning more championships. I'm serious. There's a great video on YouTube. You can check it out. It highlights if Shaq was a decent free throw shooter, he would be like the all-time scoring leader. He would have the potential to be the greatest player of all time. And this is what Kobe alluded to, is that Shaq didn't work hard. He was out of shape, overweight in those later years. And I'm not taking anything away from the younger Shaq. You know, he still has one of the greatest legacies of all time, but I'm saying he could have been better. He could have been one of the greatest of all time. I'm saying he could have been in the conversation for the greatest of all time. But regardless, he's still one of the greatest players of all time. So we'll just leave it at that. His best years were definitely 95 to around 2002, I'd say. And for a lot of people my age growing up, he was one of the funnest players to watch. Everybody loves Shaq. He's one of the funniest commentators ever. He's very quick-witted, and he's kind of reinvented himself for this generation as being an analyst on TNT. It's funny watching him and Charles Barkley go at each other all the time. And it also should be said about his success off the court. He's a very successful businessman, which an interesting story about him is his rookie year, he blew his entire rookie contract. He bought trucks. He bought his dad a truck, and he went to purchase something. I'm kind of trying to go off memory here. He tried to purchase something, and it said he didn't have any money in the bank. And this is when he got a good financial advisor. And his dad, he went to his dad and told him what happened. And his dad's like, this is why you need to have people around you to make sure you're doing better. You're not blowing all your money on stupid stuff. So Shaq is one of the most incredible businessmen of all time. He owns 155 Five Guy restaurants, 17 Auntie Annie's, 150 car washes, 40 24-hour fitness centers, a shopping center, and a movie theater in Las Vegas. He owns a nightclub in Las Vegas, and he's also in so many different commercials. You've seen him in Gold Bond, Icy Hot, The General, Burger King commercials, McDonald's commercials. It goes on and on how many endorsements he has. I mean, I'm sure there's a bunch I'm even forgetting, man. You always see him in commercials. He's incredible, and he's a true success, and he's one of my favorite players that I got to witness growing up. So let me know what you guys think down below, and I appreciate you guys watching the video. Thank you.